Last week, I talked about the Band of Seven, and one commenter mentioned how each member was based on a different aspect of war, and as a historian, I thought that idea was super interesting. So I wanted to dive in a bit deeper and give my own perspective. That being said, we might talk about some sensitive issues since, war. So heads up. As always though, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Inuyasha and Yashahime daily content. And remember, if we get to 20k before the new year, I'll be getting an Inuyasha tattoo. So let's do it. With that being said, let's start things off with one of the most hated characters in the series, Mukotsu. Mukotsu is seen in the manga trying to force himself on Kagome, and with this sort of thing being fairly common historically in war times, it makes sense for it to be represented here. Probably the most well-known example of this was Genghis Khan, who had done this so much that about 0.5% of every person on the planet today is his descendant. Mukotsu is also known for using poisonous gas, a method of warfare which was popularized and extremely frowned upon in World War I. Next up, let's look at Kyokotsu. Kyokotsu had two really defining character traits. Firstly, the dude loved to kill people, and there are obviously thousands of people in war times who kinda get off to that, so he fits that description. But the more interesting part of Kyokotsu was his cannibalism. It might surprise you to know that most people aren't a big fan of cannibalism. Go figure. However, it's still something that pops up all over history and all over the world. For example, in World War II, during the siege in Leningrad, there are a ton of accounts of cannibalism. During the nearly 900-day siege leading towards the winter of 1942, there are stories about how all the birds, rats, and pets had been eaten for survival, and when those were gone, many resorted to cannibalism to make it through. It got so bad that the Leningrad police had to actually form a special division to combat this. That being said, even in the 21st century we see examples of this in wartime, with records of cannibalism appearing as late as 2007 in the Congo or even later in other areas. Next up, Ginkotsu, the human tank man. Ginkotsu represents the advancement of war technology, moving essentially from things like saws and spears and spikes to becoming a literal tank covered in cannons and flamethrowers. However, he also represents the sacrifices soldiers can make, with many soldiers being amputated in some way or another during war times and losing arms, legs, or even worse. Suikotsu had two separate personalities, a kind-hearted doctor and a savage killer. This is a reference to how war can change people. It can take a genuine and kind person and turn them into something terrifying. And in this, I want to mention that obviously not everyone who goes to war comes back a monster. This is just an example of how good people might have to do terrible things. Furthermore, as Dr. Suikotsu, he gets panic attacks when he sees blood, which is likely a form of PTSD. Renkotsu is a sneaky strategist who is willing to betray his own people to become stronger and more powerful. This is seen throughout history. People killing their kings or commanding officers as a method of gaining rank or power themselves. This sense of greed can also be used as a reference for people killing and pillaging others in battle. Jakotsu had three defining personality traits. Firstly, they were a bit of a sadist. Secondly, they were openly gay, and thirdly, they're extremely suggestive. And the latter two are the ones we're going to be focusing on. While being gay in the military might be a more recently accepted thing in places like the US, it's pretty common throughout history, most famously in places like Greece and Macedonia, with my favorite individual in history, Alexander the Great, even having a saying that nothing could conquer Alexander the Great except Hephaestion's thighs, with Hephaestion being his best friend, or more if you believe the stories. However, there's a pretty interesting book called Nanshoku Okogami, The Great Mirror of Male Love, which discusses homosexuality in Japan and throughout Japanese history. There were periods in which homosexuality, especially in samurai, was fairly common. This would obviously become more or less popular throughout history depending on the evolving social norms and predominant religion in Japan at the time. Finally, we have Bankotsu. His biggest trait to me, aside from his bloodlust, was his loyalty. He would do anything for his comrades. He mourns their deaths, and he genuinely cared for them. Even more so, he would not forgive anyone who hurt them. The greatest offense to him was when Renkotsu betrayed the band, essentially their family, and as such, Bankotsu killed him for his betrayal. This is obviously a reference to the sense of fraternity that most military members tend to develop, as well as the punishment they can incur when they betray their comrades. Honestly, this was a really interesting and fun video for me to make. I really enjoyed looking at the Band of Seven through a different lens, so I'm hoping you liked it too. With that being said, if you did enjoy this one, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more Inuyasha and Yashahime content every single day, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.